بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ونبيك ورسولك نبي الأمي وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. Assalamu alaikum everyone and welcome. I'm so grateful that you're here today because this conversation today, inshallah, is going to touch on something that I think everyone's lives like we quietly struggle with and we feel like it's just us. But almost every Muslim I meet, man or woman, this is a struggle that they're going through. And that constant mental noise, right? That many of you resonate with the word chatter. Many of us carry this, myself included, morning to night. And, subhanAllah, this feeling of overwhelm, this feeling of heaviness, of drained and scattered, subhanAllah, just mentally tired and most importantly, disconnected. And even when our heart is seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and we genuinely want that closeness, we feel so drained or, it's almost like feel a block. And those days where your body, subhanAllah, is going through it, where your salah is just the motions but your mind is like replaying conversations you had with people at work or, things you said to your kids, all the unfinished tasks, subhanAllah, and it never quiets, right? And it just constantly, subhanAllah, as many of you said, just those open loops. So many of us are living in that inner world where things just feel busy and overstimulated. And we don't talk about it because we feel like it's just our struggle or we're not managing our time well or, we're maybe just behind compared to everyone else. And I think this is one of the biggest misconceptions. Inshallah, today with my guest, we're definitely going to be unpacking that as well. How to make sense of this emotional turmoil that we're going through and really this emotional overload, inshallah. And so the goal today is how do you quiet the scattered mind in a way that, alhamdulillah, feels spiritually safe and grounding? And many of you echoed that, that's what obviously pulled you. And we want to have this conversation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the center, which is what Discover You is about. So those of you that are new to Discover You, welcome. Alhamdulillah, we've been around since 2007, founded by this late Sheikh Muhammad al-Sharif, rahmatullah. And the mission we have here is to uplift Muslims to be the hero of their story, but always keeping Allah at the center. That every step we're taking towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, towards when you think of growth, that it's always aligned with our faith, alhamdulillah. And there's no one better that we could think of to have this conversation with than, alhamdulillah, Sister Sarah Sultan, who is, mashallah, a therapist, a dear guest, and a community member here at Discover You, mashallah. She is a therapist based in Texas, but she's also, mashallah, done a lot of research and article writing with Yakin Institute as well. Alhamdulillah, she's also an instructor with Al Maghrib Institute. And I try to bring her on whenever I can, alhamdulillah. So officially, assalamu alaikum, Sarah.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. How are you doing, Razia?
I'm good, alhamdulillah. How are you? I don't know if you can hear the adhan in the back, but
No, I didn't hear it.
the Zoo's blocking. Alhamdulillah. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. And I know we've been going back and forth, but one thing I always mention when I bring Sarah on is that, like, mashallah, I think when people see her, you think like therapist, mashallah, she's, a religious teacher, like she's got it all together. And what I love about Sarah is she's so, mashallah, great at coupling like the secular with the religious, but then doing it from a perspective of someone who's like living the reality in the trenches. And, she is a mother as well, mashallah. She's moving all the puzzle pieces just like you and I are navigating it. And so, alhamdulillah, I really appreciate just how real and raw she brings, her heart to this work. So you're not just getting theory, but inshallah, we're going to have a lot of practical conversations today as well.
Jazakallah khair. I appreciate that. Yeah, I definitely don't have it all together. I mean, nobody does. That's just the reality of it. So, alhamdulillah, I'm glad that that comes across like the reality of not having it all together. So that's good. Alhamdulillah.
Because you bring in like real life examples. Like you've done that how always, I think, in our webinars we've had and the conversations, and I appreciate that. I know our students and community appreciates it. Alhamdulillah, you link it to real life, struggles that you have and just trying to manage that. And I think that's so important because sometimes like we present just the knowledge and the theory and it's so removed of the humanity. And people are like, okay, so I guess she must be, just like has this polished approach and I just can't figure it out.
Yeah, it's like it gives this impression of somebody being able to achieve something superhuman, right? And versus realizing that we're all human and we all have our struggles and we try to get through those struggles with a level of closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We're always striving to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through it, but with imperfection, right? Because that's the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. So alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah for that.
So I'm really excited for this and for everyone here before another like 10 messages come in. Yes, it's recorded. Inshallah, you'll get the recording if you register. So, what we're going to tackle today, inshallah, in our conversation is why do certain thoughts repeat? How do we address the overstimulation in our mind? And, like, what is this restlessness? So, inshallah, Sarah is going to help us unpack that. What the Quran teaches about a scattered heart, not just a scattered mind, right? How the nafs responds emotionally, inshallah, and just really powerful, simple grounding practice that Sarah will give us. And as I mentioned, she's the keynote, mashallah, our speaker this month and teacher in the Discovery community and module. So she's going to be teaching a deeper module, inshallah, inside the community. And she's going to have a live workshop at the end of the month where we're going to have mashallah more practical components and then Q&A as well. So Iman is going to be sharing the link for the Discovery community. And really, my hope is that you walk away from this conversation today feeling a sense of relief and that nothing is wrong with you, inshallah, but that, you don't have to struggle alone and you don't have to struggle in silence. And I think that's one thing that, alhamdulillah, we try to keep pushing in our community. So, alhamdulillah, I think the first place, kind of, Sarah, I want to start the conversation is why does our inner world feel so crowded? And, why is it that even when our hearts are like sincerely seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and want that peace, that it feels so unattainable?
Mm. I think that you hit the nail on the head of, you said not having to tackle this alone, because I think that this feels like a very lonely journey, right? Where when we're overthinking, when we're flooded with these thoughts, when we find our thoughts spiraling, we feel like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me that I just cannot get my thoughts under control? Does anybody else feel this overwhelmed with the way their thought process goes? And the answer is yes. Like, this is something that is very, very common. And you saw, like, even one of the themes is especially for mothers, that's also something very common, especially for women. That's something that's very common, but men struggle with it as well. So I think that a big part of why our inner world seems so cluttered is because our outer world is so cluttered. When we are talking about like our lives and the expectations that society has put upon us and social media coming into the mix and all of these external, like, you're trying to juggle so many different hats, so many different roles, so many different expectations. And a lot of the expectations are impossible ones. And so naturally, your mind is going to try and filter and navigate that and organize that. But because it's impossible to organize, your mind just keeps going and going and going. So our external world really can result in a lot of the clutter that we feel internally.
SubhanAllah. One of the things as you're speaking, like what that's bringing up for me is I had heard this one like trauma researcher, and he's saying, and the promise of technology was that it's supposed to give us more time. But what it's actually done is sped up time. And so we're just exhausted trying to keep up. And, I'm sure you've heard that stat, right? Like people are exposed to the amount of information we're exposed to in a day is what people used to be exposed to in a lifetime. And so, like our minds and our hearts are not made for this type of exposure. And so, when I think crowded, I'm like, oh God, like within the first hour of the day, even if you don't touch your phone first thing, but eventually like work messages and emails, there's just a lot that we're taking in. So yes, again, just like affirming for everyone, like you're not alone. This is a reality. And I think, epidemic, unfortunately, that like no matter where you are in the world, subhanAllah, everyone is facing. And I think like our mashallah international audience right now is feeling that as well. So one of the things that I notice a lot, Sarah, is people who overthink feel like they're spiritually weak or like, they're just spiritually sensitive. And that like, this is a weakness within me that I'm overthinking. Like there must be something wrong with me or that I can't control. What would you say? Or like, how does that come up for you?
Yeah, I think it's so important to differentiate thoughts from your heart. And yes, they are intertwined, they can interact with one another, but don't allow shaitan to kind of fool you into thinking that because I feel like I am stuck in this negative spiral, because I feel like I can't control my thoughts, then that necessitates that I am weak spiritually. That's not accurate. And actually, something that I've often found are the people who try the hardest sometimes to connect with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the people who really, really strive for spiritual practice, for being consistent in their worship. I find that a lot of times those people are the ones who really can struggle with overthinking, right? Because we overthink because we care. And so anything that you care deeply about can result in overthinking, right? Where you're just like, okay, if I do this, then this will happen. What if I do this and then this is the consequence? What if only I had done right? And so there's like these regrets, there's future worries because you care. Right. If you didn't care, these would not be thoughts that come into your mind. And so, actually, if you're having these thoughts about, am I spiritually weak? Am I really, connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that I should? All of these different things, that shows a level of attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is really something that is beautiful, even if you feel like you're kind of all over the place mentally, right? And so it's different. The skill set of being able to handle overthinking is different than having spiritual strength. So that's something that's really important.
And I guess, like, if we were also just to define overthinking, is it that, when you're about to do a task, you're gonna replay it in your head, or after you've done it, you're sitting there, with self-criticism, like layers of that? Like, if you can kind of just lay out what within the spiritual language, like what overthinking and maybe even like what's healthy overthinking versus I guess like, what can fall into waswas. And I'm also obviously imagining like, Masha, what you just said, of someone who really does care about the relationship with Allah and striving is, someone who like is a threat to shaitan, right? Like someone who cares that much, obviously he's going to plant the seeds. So yeah, if you can maybe just define like the spectrum of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love what you just said about being a threat to when you are somebody who cares deeply, you are a threat to Shaitan, and he is going to get at you in a way that is going to resonate with you personally. That's why the battle with Shaitan is so hard because he doesn't use the same approach with everybody. And so if you're somebody who cares deeply and you're also a deep thinker, he will get at you through your thoughts. That's just the way it works, right? And so it, your statement absolutely makes sense with regards to that. So before I go into kind of the spectrum of overthinking, I want to highlight kind of some of the root of overthinking because I think that that helps to build a little bit of an understanding, right? Where one of the main functions of overthinking is self-perception. Self-protection, excuse me. So self-protection, right? Where your brain is trying to protect you. That's what it's doing, right? It's not trying to attack, it's not trying to harm you, it's trying to protect you. And so because it's trying to protect you, right, then your overthinking is serving a purpose according to your brain. Your brain thinks that it's serving a very beneficial purpose. And that's why it's so hard to break that cycle because breaking that cycle would mean letting down that shield of protection. And nobody wants to do that, right? So to a certain extent, overthinking can be, all of us struggle with a certain extent of thinking, right? We won't say overthinking because it's a healthy level of thinking. This is what like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he praises the people who think in the Quran, right? Because being a critical thinker, being able to think through the consequences of, okay, if I choose to binge watch Netflix right now, then am I going to be able to wake up for Fajr tomorrow? That's a thought process that's very healthy. Right? Because you're trying to think what is the result of this action? What is the potential consequence? Where it comes into unhealthy territory is when overthinking results in paralysis, where I cannot make a decision because I am stuck in the thought process and all of the what ifs that could possibly happen. Okay, if I do this angle, this angle, this angle, until you're frozen. You're frozen. And the trick with overthinking is that it makes you feel productive but it's not actually productive. It's like pacing, physical pacing in a room, you're not getting anywhere. And that's what overthinking is. It's pacing in your brain. And so you end up stuck in the same place. And that's where we kind of need to be a little bit cautious and work on that thought process.
That is so powerful and, just going to the root of it as well. Um, because yeah, like these are habits that have been developed over time, sometimes, like, as you said, for self-preservation, for protection, and or we, learned along the way that it's good to put myself through certain filters. It reminds me of a interesting study I had read. I think it was like Harvard Business Review about imposter syndrome and how, usually women of color will have like report, higher struggles with like imposter syndrome. And they're like, it makes sense because women of color are made to feel or second guess themselves so much more in the workplace compared to like, let's say, a white male counterpart. And so, but then there's like this other research around it that was showed people who do have imposter syndrome, which really I've come to now define it as like it's your level of sincerity. Like it's actually, I think a certain level of imposter syndrome is so healthy because it's you questioning, like, am I doing this for a reason? Am I good at this? And, if I feel inadequate, like that's a light bulb to like maybe an area I need to grow in and work on. And so I feel like what you're sharing, alhamdulillah, is almost like befriending the thinking in certain aspects. Like I think maybe, the premise or usually the approach to this conversation, overthinking, is very negative or it's, again, it's very exhausting in certain aspects, but it's almost like, okay, if I'm giving this so much thought or if I keep replaying this, it's obviously very important to me. This must be a really big struggle in my life. And, hey, like, is there something here that like I'm missing? Like, clearly, like my heart feels unsettled. And, there's something here. So to take the conversation to the heart direction, when the heart does feel unsettled, right, for us, the mind does try to make up the difference. And that can be like another layer as well. Are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, you know what, when you ask that question, the first thing that comes to my mind is the concept of cognitive dissonance, where it's like this idea that when our life, our actions, our behaviors, our choices don't align with our values. And when they don't align, we experience something called cognitive dissonance, which is a very uncomfortable feeling. It's like this underlying anxiety of something is just not right. Something's not right. And sometimes you can't pinpoint exactly what's not right, but it's this underlying feeling. Now, we have a choice in when we experience cognitive dissonance. We can either change our action and live in accordance with our values to bridge that gap, or we can change the way we think about our values and change the values themselves so we feel comfortable with the action. And I think a lot of our society now is really pulling us to change our values, to undermine some of those values, and focus on what society deems as important, right? So when you open your social media, it's distracting you, it's giving you sometimes funny reels, but then sometimes also unrealistic reels of where you should be inputting your energy into your life, where you should be channeling that energy into your life. That's not going to bring a sense of fulfillment and peace. And that's where our heart comes into the mix. So that even when you're like, well, I'm cooking 3-course meals for my family, I'm packing these lovely lunches for my kids that I see on social media. I'm like, I'm making sure that my house is Instagram ready. It's like it looks beautiful. And
All while smiling
oh,
and
yes,
walking through the meadow.
working put together and also worrying constantly about my weight and my appearance and all of these different things, right? Or for men, it could be, and for women as well, I am getting higher on the career ladder. I am pursuing my education. I'm getting degree after degree, and I am prioritizing that. Now, inherently, there's nothing wrong with all of these things. But when you attach your contentment and your happiness to these things, that's when you start to feel like, "Ah, there's this void, there's this empty space, and I keep trying to fill it. I'm doing everything that society is expecting me to do, and I still don't feel fulfilled." That's where it can f you find yourself stuck in your thoughts because you're like, "I need to find where the missing link is." And that's where our spiritual heart can come into the mix.
SubhanAllah, I love that so much. And what you just like said is basically, if I'm seeing these things that are disrupting what perhaps, right, like everyone's got, inshallah, like our priorities are straight and our values are straight. But when our heart is exposed to, you know, our feed, and that feed may not just be on socials, it may be even the people you sit with, that can be your daily feed, and interactions. It's like you create a level of unsafety within yourself. right? Like subhanallah, and that level of unsafety, then, like it's the anxiety that it can breed, and the level of subhanallah disruption in the mind and heart. And then all of a sudden it's like you're off balance, subhanallah. And I'm imagining like it's just like this is already just going in so many directions, but it's also, again, the whole reason I love having these conversations and unpacking it is just alhamdulillah, like this is where, so much of like a relationship with the Quran and like Salah is always about like bringing back that internal safety that we so badly need, so we can start to build and so we can inshallah set that strong foundation. So like that, just those two puzzle pieces came up for me as you painted that picture so beautifully, mashallah. And one of the things you do often say, Sarah, which I love, is that our mind doesn't attack us, it alerts us. And can you explain the difference between like intrusive thoughts that are like clinical and repetitive thoughts that are just simply, again, the mind processing overload?
Yeah, so, I love that, like, our mind doesn't attack us on purpose, right? It alerts us. Um, so when how do you know that the level of overthinking that you're experiencing is at more of a clinical level? Is when it really impacts your ability to function in your daily life. It is getting in the way of you being able to accomplish tasks, and I don't mean like, "Oh, I was really nervous about responding to that email, and so I keep procrastinating it." That's normal, right? What I mean is it's getting in the way of relationships. It's getting in the way of you being able to get up in the morning. It's getting in the way of you being able to fall asleep at night, right? Where it is impacting your daily level of functioning. If it is impacting your ability to get up for salah, for being able to fulfill that, where it's because I'm just in my head where I'm thinking, do I even have wudu? Did I lose that wudu? You start your salah and you start to wonder, did I, like, is the salah even valid? Do I have to pray it again? Right? That can get into what's called OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder territory. And that's where that then needs to be addressed professionally. What is hard sometimes is because there is an overlap between like spiritual waswasa and obsessive compulsive thoughts. And so sometimes it can be really confusing as to like, okay, well, which one is it? So I saw this really beautiful statement about differentiating between waswasa, like the whispers that come from shaitan, and the whispers that come from our own nafs, our own self. And we all experience both. It's important to realize we all experience both. Yourself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes in the Quran that our own self, it urges us toward sin. It urges us toward the things that feel pleasurable, right? And that is
Yeah.
absolutely a fact. And then we're also told in the Quran about the whispers that come from the external, that come from shaitan, jinn, and things like that. And there's even the whispers that come from human, like from human beings that are encouraging you toward negativity. So we all experience all three. But trying to figure out at what level is it okay and is it healthy and is it normal? And what level is it where, okay, now this is something where I have to be able to address it. That's where it can get a little bit, dicey, but I would say that it's when you feel like you're functioning, your ability to function in daily life has really been overtaken by these thought processes.
Well, that's so powerful, and I really appreciate you speaking to that. And I'll be honest, like I think being very raw, because I do think there's just so much coddling sometimes in this conversation because we're so isolated. Again, like, we can't ignore the epidemic of loneliness and just how that can feed into a lot of this. And I feel like sometimes, a few disruptions, like people can take it as, oh my God, I need to go get medicated. And there is enough research to show like there's overprescription of antidepressant, but there's a lot more effective natural remedies, like, subhanAllah, just physical activity, obviously, giving yourself exposure to good social circles. So I feel like this is where it's so important to like have community, have, proper help that's faith-based help guiding you through that as well. Like you can just, honestly have those conversations with yourself and recognize that this is a struggle. Like this is no one is denying the struggle that this takes, but I do think, we have to hold up that honesty mirror with ourselves and really ask ourselves, like, is this a compounding of so many things. And I think, for everyone here, there's some people asking in the chat, like, what about factors like health related and hormones and all of these, subhanAllah, are factors that can play into this. Your diet, obviously for women, menstrual cycle factors coming into this. But something you said that is so powerful, and one of my Quran teachers taught that I've always held on to is that so the Prophet ﷺ, daily of God, morning and evening is, Surah Al-Falaq and Surah Nas are part of it. And in Surah Al-Falaq, you're seeking protection from the outside and you only seek protection in one of Allah's names. Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, and then, all the things are listed. Surah Nas, you seek refuge or protection in three of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's names from what? From the internal battle, because it's far more intrusive and heavier, subhanAllah. And I just feel like that is just, again, so validating and so comforting that, like, it is hard. Ya Rab, it is hard. But this is the battle we need the most help in, and, coming to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that. So I just feel like, sometimes people hear it and they feel so defeated or feel like, that this is not normal. But I'm like, no, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us it is actually normal. This amount of waswas and internal battle that you're having, this jihad al-nafs, it is normal.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that reflection on Surah Al-Falaq and Surah An-Nas. SubhanAllah, is so powerful that, yeah, internally, when things are coming from an external standpoint, like when you know it's coming from the outside, that's hard, but you also know where it's coming from. Right? Like if somebody, somebody cursed you out as you were driving and everything, that like all of a sudden your heart is pattering and you know why. It's like, oh, this just happened. I almost hit this car, or this driver got like was really aggressive with me, or whatever it is. You understand. And so it allows your brain to then say, once the danger has passed, you can now relax. You can let it go. You have that closure of knowing this happened outside of me. When it's happening inside of you, sometimes you just feel like, you know, I I I don't know where it's coming from. I don't know. And because I don't know where it's coming from, I can't address it and I can't let it go. And that's where that cycle of overthinking continues, because you don't feel safe enough to let it go, because you don't know when the danger has passed, because the danger is inside and it feels so scary. But we all experience that. And I think you're absolutely right that we don't want to over coddle ourselves. And I think, our community, this is a side note, a tangent, but our community, I think we were so anti mental health and getting the help for a while that now we've really encouraged it. And I think we've overcorrected, right? And I think that's kind of what you're seeing, Razia, right? Where it's like, okay, I will say it even for myself, right? Where as a therapist, I used to say, like, therapy is for everybody, like everybody can benefit. And as I've grown in this field, I've realized that, you know, there's so much benefit for therapy when it's needed. It is incredible. And I've seen such transformation. And I'm so privileged, alhamdulillah, to be able to work in this field. And at the same time, not every struggle needs a professional therapist. Our minds can, like, there's so much that we can learn and work on. There's so much that is normal that we experience at this point, but sometimes we get so scared because we're not used to being uncomfortable that it becomes a bigger issue that then does require therapy. So training ourselves to be okay with some of that level of discomfort that, like the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, there's an example of a companion who, for example, in his prayer, he would get these like this waswasa thoughts of like to almost an obsessive compulsive extent of if he had let it progress. And he told the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, every time I start praying, I think that I've lost my wudu and I want to stop and go make wudu and start again. And the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said that comes from shaitan. That's waswasa from shaitan. Just ignore it and continue your salah. Seek refuge from Allah, right? And continue your salah. And that is the therapeutic treatment for obsessive compulsive disorder, is exposure therapy. So that was a side note, a tangent. I'm sorry. I just wanted to highlight that point that you mentioned.
I appreciate it. I made a video on this a couple years ago because I was like, I just feel like we have an absence of community, and like you said, we're a hyper therapized community now where it's like someone, friend comes to say, "Oh, you should seek help." It's like sometimes it's just you need good social support, and we don't even know how to have like just again sometimes uncomfortable conversations or something. I'm really struggling, especially a lot of the new moms who are here in this chat. I know can be very isolating, and so a lot of these moms will feel like I can't go and share because maybe I'm going to be labeled X, Y, and Z. So I still feel like, yeah, we just don't know how to listen to one another. And I'm sure you've experienced this in your profession. I know as a spiritual coach, I have too, where sometimes someone just comes and it's like they literally just want to talk on the session. And I'm like, Sapana, this person just needs a friend, like a good companion to be able to lighten their load with. And that kind of brings me to this other question that I think is really important is so you kind of you distinguish like what waswasa is and sometimes just the own our own nafs. But when that anxiety, like when things do feel uncertain in life, and you're going through the tests of life, why is it that overthinking just gets so much louder? And how can someone calm it without shaming it and moving away from that safety? So it's kind of like what's the saying? When you're down, like you what is it? I'm sort of like butchering it if I say it. And like when you're down or they kick you harder or something. But like imagine like when you're down, all
Oh,
what shaitan is. You're just so
yeah.
much more vulnerable in that place of I guess, uncertainty. And so subhanAllah, again, it's a coping mechanism that you're overthinking in certain aspects, but it's to your detriment. So I guess if you could walk us through like, A, why does that happen? So when someone's struggling and there's uncertainty you're facing in life at that moment, that the overthinking and the nafs and the waswas just feels so much louder and perhaps unmanageable. How can one, A, like uh, identify that effectively? And then inshallah, how can someone calm it without shaming it?
And I think this is such an important question, about overthinking because this really gets at the core of what overthinking is attempting to do for us, which is when we overthink, what we're doing is we're trying to control everything. We're trying to get over the sense of uncertainty, and it is an inability to tolerate uncertainty. And uncertainty tolerance, it's a phrase in the field where it is linked to healthy resilience. It's linked to the ability to bounce back from difficulties. It's linked to healthy mental health, right? Being able to tolerate uncertainty is a really important component for us as human beings because so much of life is uncertain. And overthinking tries to counteract that. When and just think about it, like reflect on any type of thought process that you're overthinking about, whether it's, oh, my boss sent me an email and they want to meet with me in a couple of days. What did I do? What did I do something wrong? Like what could have happened or whatever? Or, my child, this happened to like I'm worried about this happening to my child. So how am I going to prevent that from happening? Overthinking all of those different things. So, overthinking is an attempt to control the uncontrollable. It's an attempt to know everything, right? To be able to deal with uncertainty by eliminating uncertainty. But what happens when you overthink is things are still uncertain. Like you can never get to the point of certainty, and that's why we can't stop. That's why overthinking doesn't stop because your brain is trying to reach certainty and control that, but it's impossible because that's just not the way life works. Like, you won't know what your boss is gonna say until you go to the meeting, right? And that's when you stop overthinking about that, right? But then you start beating yourself up about having wasted so much time overthinking, right? So overthinking yields like it yields a lot of pain, right? Because you have the pain of the moment of, of not knowing and having to like you don't know, and so you're trying to navigate that pain by going through every single possibility, terrible possibility, so you end up doubling your pain, right? And so it is an attempt to control, and I think that's really at the root, and that's why a lot of our antidotes have to do with being able to relinquish some of that control.
Rana. I'm sorry, I feel like I could be here hours with you,
Yeah, I know.
but
I'm like, "Oh my gosh, there's so much to say. I don't know how to narrow it down."
yeah. No, I mean, like you answered it beautifully, but there's just so many layers to unpack when you're speaking, right? Because I'm like, there's like an indoctrination of, um, subhanallah, like when you're saying, I remember when one of my other friends who's a therapist was like, sharing like this diagnosis of what you had shared initially, right? Like what was it? It was like change, like resistance to change. And I'm just like looking at her. I'm like, that's a diagnosis. Like you're like, who's not human? Like who
Mhm.
doesn't struggle with you? It's like, so I almost feel like, this hyper diagnosis, and then we create prisons out of these diagnoses. And so I've had clients come to me who have shared this diagnosis, like, oh, I have a resistance change and I really struggle with it. And I'm like, are you human? Like, of course you do. Like, that's okay. That's the journey. That's the journey we're on. So I feel like, what you said, like we're seeking certainty. And I'm like, subhanAllah, this is exactly what Allah subhanahu is addressing in the Quran. Like, you're not gonna get that certainty in this life. And I'm gonna be honest, I'm just like point blank, if you don't have a relationship with the Quran, you're going to continuously feel pain because it's just that one ayah that can give you the stability of like the stability I will not get in this world, but Allah Subhanahu gives it to me through the Quran. And that's all I need. And so, really anchoring ourselves with that. So I love what you're saying. And I'm like, just bringing up like subhanAllah, many of us are indoctrinated from these secular societies and have gone through the education systems. And so, yes, there's this constant like obsession with control, an obsession with doing all that you can, and it's within your power. And if it's not, then clearly something is wrong. And so I feel like, it's like a societal um purge we have to have of like so much of what subhanAllah we were spoon fed. And now, inshallah, as adults and going through these struggles and tests, be like, oh my God, this thinking is just not in alignment with what my soul needs and what my soul was created for, subhanAllah. So yes, I feel like I could be here for hours with you, unpacking this, mashallah, but at least I hope for everyone, like I'm seeing the chat, many of you, alhamdulillah, resonating with this, many of you affirming like some of the struggles you're having and like they're wanting the safe spaces. So this is why we've created the Discover You community, because one of the pillars for us was we have to move away from just theoretical faith to practical faith and inshallah how to live Islam. And so what Sarah is touching on today is inshallah going to be part of her deeper module that she does this month in the Discovery community. And then we have it's followed up with inshallah live workshop where she's going to do like practical grounding components and then Q&A as well, and a safe community where there's mashallah people interacting or sharing as you go along this journey what you're applying, what the struggles are, because like I said, everyone's going through this together. And this raw version you're seeing of me, it's because like I'm in it with all of you, and I hear people going through it, and I'm just like, you have to stop tiptoeing around these things. There's no one, people of faith. We're talking like the teachers and shaykh who you look up to. There's no one that's above any of this struggle. And so the more that, alhamdulillah, I think we can start creating these spaces and people can, inshallah, step into them together collectively and support one another, we're going to start seeing these changes. And that's why we bring people on like, mashallah, Sarah, who, alhamdulillah, like has the knowledge and also the practical and is very grounded in faith because that's so essential for this conversation. So here's one direction I want to take this into, Sarah, and that is like, again, having that a raw, honest conversation. Because sometimes I feel like we talk about the overstimulation, and sometimes when I'm having these conversations with women, it's this like, oh, I don't know why I'm overstimulated and drained. Like, what could possibly be feeding this? And I'm like, why don't you just sit and tell me what you did in the last hour? It's like, the phone, and it's hyper plugged in like many different ways. So what like how did we get here? Like what are some of the things that if we want to be honest with ourselves and not like put our head in the sand and be like, oh, I have no idea, but I'm just overstimulated and I know there's just so much going on. Like, can you just speak to a little bit of that? Like, what are some of the roots, causes, and exposures that people are giving themselves? And inshallah, we'll talk about the cure a little bit, but yeah, like what's leading people down this rabbit hole?
You know, I think that like we talked about before, the idea of internal clutter and feeling pulled in so many directions internally is a symptom of being pulled in so many directions externally, and those directions often not aligning with our purpose, right? Like if you think about juggling, there are certain tasks that we juggle that are very heavy, that are very hard, but they don't leave us exhausted in the same way that, that other things might leave us exhausted. So, I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a day that you are okay, a lot of you are moms, so I'll just kind of go through an example of what a mom might experience, right? Where you wake up, you're, navigating with your kids, dealing with your kids, going from activity to activity. You decide to meal prep a little bit. You then stop in and visit a parent or give a parent a call. You have your salah done. You decide to, okay, I'm going to read my daily few pages of the Quran. As I'm driving, I'm going to try and listen to a lecture and everything. Even with that, you are feeling pulled in so many different directions. You're really, it can feel like an overload, but a lot of times when you're able to do some of those things, you feel a sense of purpose and fulfillment in a lot of those activities. But now let's say you have a day where you're at home, you're like, I'm just going to have a lazy day at home. I really need this break. I'm going to decompress. And so you lie down in bed and you scroll through your phone. You're scrolling, scrolling, scrolling on YouTube Shorts, on Instagram, on Facebook Reels, on whatever it is, TikTok and things like you're scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And at the end of the day, how do you feel, right? Do you feel rejuvenated? Do you feel refreshed? Do you feel like, you know what, that was the rest that I really needed? And now I feel like I can go tomorrow, wake up like and really, really do my tasks. And I feel like I am recentered. Nobody has ever scrolled all day in bed and felt recentered, right? Recentering is where we are mindful of, okay, if I choose to take on this task, if I choose to do this, is that feeding the part of myself that I want to feed? Is that feeding my values? Is that feeding the core of who I am? And when we consciously do that, a lot of times we are able to juggle a lot without necessarily that same feeling of overwhelm. So it's not
Mm,
only about how much we're trying to juggle, it's about why we're trying to juggle those things. And a lot of times, even when we are not doing a ton, are we being pulled? Like, is our external world pulling us away from the core of who we are, which is as worshipers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And so, that's something that I think we cannot overstate enough is, we look at like Muslims in history or even Muslims who live now who we're like, "Wow, how do they do that? How do they accomplish so much, mashallah?" Do they just have a different, like, 24 hours and things like that? A lot of, like, these amazing people that we see, it's because of what, they're focusing on that value, that core of who they are, and they're reigniting that intention of connecting with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during that time, and that also really can help to shut down some of that overthinking. And that's a very theoretical, general way of saying it, so it's not as practical as we'll talk about in the module, inshallah, but that I think that that's a really core element.
yeah, subhanAllah, and that's really powerful because basically it's highlighting it's, like this quote I read a few years back. It was like, it's not what you're doing that matters as much as what you're doing in the recharge time. And I know there's so much research. Actually, there's one done around like physicians where, when physicians had like 9-minute breaks in between patients, and the ones that were told like not to change anything, so they usually went on their phones in between those 9 minutes, versus ones who were told, the controlled group, were told, don't touch your phone in those 9 minutes. And we want you to just like sit, do some breath work, like just be bored, be okay with being bored. And obviously the group that, practiced that felt a lot less overwhelmed at the end of their day, felt a lot less overstimulated, subhanAllah. And so, yeah, we're just not comfortable with being bored and letting our mind have that rest. And I really appreciate you touching on that because, like, 'cause I feel like, sometimes we're not willing to be honest with ourselves, and if we're not, then I feel like that change can't come, and so we can just put our hand at the sand and be like, "Oh, I'm so overstimulated," but I'm like, "But you're not letting your mind and heart have any of that silence that, Allah Subhanahu wa calls us to have as well." So I know, inshallah, you're gonna be teaching the Overthink Detox module, inshallah, and that's what, the community is gonna be around for this month, alhamdulillah. What is, like, one rounding tool that you can give us today, Sarah, that, people who are here, alhamdulillah, are benefiting from this conversation, inshallah, that they could practice that would help them with some of the topics that we've covered?
So I knew that you were gonna ask me this question, and it was so hard to narrow it down to one. It was I was overthinking, racking my brain trying to think, what is, like, one I want them to be able to leave with something they can do right now, right? And so okay, so I couldn't do just one, I had to do 2. So so the first is especially for
Let it
people who the people who are just, kind of starting to build that awareness of like, I'm really struggling with overthinking and you're just starting on this journey of trying to address it, one of the things that I think can be really helpful is actually, and it sounds counterintuitive, but actually scheduling time every day to overthink. And what this is going to do is it's going to teach your brain that, like, you're gonna start finding this, like, you're gonna start spiraling, and then you're gonna say, "Wait, it's I have it on my calendar." You're gonna be able to tell your brain, and you can even put it on your calendar, like,
Mm,
for, I would say, 30 minutes. You don't wanna do too much, but 30 minutes is, I think, a sweet spot, and you're gonna be able to tell your brain, like, "Okay, it's not time for this, but I promise I will address it. I promise I'm
mm,
going to get to it." And what this does is it builds self-trust, right? Where you're like, you're gonna fulfill this promise to yourself, to your brain that, "Okay, I'm going to do this." But also, I would say, have the intention of this being an act of worship, which sounds also counterintuitive, but when you assign, "I'm only gonna do this for 30 minutes," what space does that now allow you in the rest of your day? That what extra, connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can you now achieve because you're not constantly being pulled into that overthinking mode in your mind. And so intend it as an act of worship. So I think in the beginning stages, having that scheduled is helpful, and you will not, inshallah, need it forever. The
mm,
second tip is, as you progress, I call it name it and aim it. Okay? So first, name,
mm,
be self-aware that you are overthinking, and name the type of overthinking you're doing. Like, "Oh, I'm thinking about, the what ifs, what if, like, if my, child doesn't, pass this test, and the what ifs of how that's gonna impact their, or the what ifs of my boss, or what is the theme of my overthinking?" That's naming it, right? And it's especially helpful if you write that down, and then aim it. Aiming it is going to be action. And this is so helpful because what overthinking does is it keeps you in inaction. And so now you want to translate it into a very small action, where you are going to, depending on the theme, right? You're going to shift from overthinking to something else, like almost like changing a channel. So you can do, one suggestion would be to change the channel to from overthinking to the gratitude channel in your mind, right? Where you're like, okay, I can't overthink about this and also look for all the blessings in my life. So let me do that. Or I'm going to aim it where I'm going to, like, I'm really anxious about sending this email and I'm overthinking it constantly. Okay, I'm just gonna create, like, bare bones draft of, like, bullet points that I wanna write. I'm not gonna send it right now. I just want to start it, right? Just getting
mm.
into that action mode. So those were my 2 that I was able to
I
hang my
love
paint.
those. Yeah. No, I love those so much, especially the first one. Like, it seems so straightforward, but we don't do that. We're like carrying around this baggage all day, but giving it alhamdulillah, us, and creating really a ritual, which is so powerful, right? Around this place. So it's 30 minutes. I get to overthink and I get to play out every, scenario I want. That I struggle with or overthink, putting it there. And then I love the second one too, mashallah. Like, what is the theme of it? Because you're right, so many of them fall under what ifs. And to that can, help you kind of heal too. And why am I always stuck in the what if scenario? And then I love the action part because yes, inaction breeds anxiety, and I know so many that struggle with that. This can build a really healthy practice. Alhamdulillah. I don't know about others in the chat, so you guys kind of chime in here to this part. But do you feel empowered and inspired to quiet the noise now in your heart and mind from when you entered this conversation today? Yeah, alhamdulillah. And do you feel like you want to connect with purpose, like, or reconnect with the purpose in your life? Yes. And we know that overthinking, subhanallah, excuse me, and the overstimulation can rob us of the most important piece of our inner world, right? And so, alhamdulillah, that is why the Discovery Circle was pleaded. That's why, alhamdulillah, we have people like Sarah Sultan, inshallah, coming on and her talking about the overthink detox, the cure for the scattered mind this month, inshallah. Excuse me. Um, so, this is really to finally give yourself the tools, the knowledge, and to settle that. And so I know Iman is sharing it in the link, and this is your opportunity to connect with it, to finally quiet and take that one step forward. I'm gonna go have a coffee fit though once.
No, it's okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Bismillah, I know, gosh, when that tickle, that happens to me so often when I'm talking, as take a moment and I can talk for a little bit if you wanna just
Sorry,
let it out.
I'm excited about this topic, Sarah. Go share.
Alhamdulillah. One of the things, like, as a takeaway when I think about the idea of overthinking is, this concept that overthinking is underfeeling, right? Meaning that, like, if I think enough, I can get rid of this difficult feeling. And so it's not allowing us to sit with that discomfort. And so I think for us as people of faith, as Muslims, as servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, realizing that a lot of times overthinking is based in fear, and we have this source of just safety and goodness and security and protection, and that is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so being able to, when we, because a lot of times we struggle to shut down overthinking because we're like, I have to just think through one more scenario because that might be the one. That might be the one. And realizing that, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in whatever scenario you face, if he puts you there, he's gonna get you through it, right? So you don't need to overthink it because you have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so you can allow yourself to feel that uncertainty. You can allow yourself to feel that little bit of anxiety because you know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to help you through whatever scenario your brain can or cannot predict.
Yeah, I love that so much. And alhamdulillah, like as you described that, like I always feel just this comfort of like being held by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Like, and I feel like even just when you do your dua and put our hands together, like I just feel this like warmth and comfort, like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is holding in whatever I'm going through right now. And I just want to like really remind everyone here that if there's like alhamdulillah any benefit that you got from this conversation, inshallah, imagine what, alhamdulillah, a full hour of teaching just from Sarah, inshallah, that you will benefit from. And this is not to replace, yes, you getting therapy, I want to help. But I'll be honest, like, I think powerful knowledge that's rooted in faith can help unlock a lot of doors in places you might be stuck in. And then, inshallah, to do that within a community where, alhamdulillah, there's going to be extra resources from the module, the workshops, additional tools that we share, and mashallah, peer sessions that we have. Because, like I said, I know the epidemic of loneliness is something that everyone's struggling with. And you can go to a class, sadly, in person sometimes, and leave with not even having any interaction with someone. And so, alhamdulillah, we have this community that we've created. It's so beautiful, mashallah, the interactions, the shifts that people are already having, being able to very safely share, process thoughts and reflections that they have after the teaching sessions from today's module or like the podcast session today as well, alhamdulillah. So I encourage you, go check out the link. Iman has just shared it, inshallah, and benefit from the full module that Ustadha is going to be doing, Overthink, Detox, Cure for the Scattered Mind, inshallah, and then the tools and resources. Inshallah, in the Q&A we're going to have with her at the end of the month as well. It's like such a minimal fee. Basically, this is the Muslim like halal Netflix, I would say, because every month, mashallah, we've got a different speaker and teacher and theme and very intentional things, you guys, things that, alhamdulillah, we know the community is struggling with that we want to go deeper into, inshallah, and address. So, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair, Sarah, for always bringing your full heart and self into these sessions. Despite, mashallah, I know like everything else that's on your plate, we appreciate you, and may Allah subhanahu put barakah in all that you do and fill your heart with sakina and rida. And, it means a lot to have you part of our community.
Oh, I mean, Jazakallah khair, and the same to you. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala multiply your reward and just really accept all of the efforts of you and your entire team for bringing such amazing programming to the community and being able to address so many needs that a lot of people don't talk about. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept it.
Ameen, alhamdulillah. Inshallah, we'll see you later in the month. And for everyone, and I hope to see you inside the community. If you have any questions, email our team, inshallah, and go take advantage. We have the special founders rate right now, so I know you get to take advantage of that as well. Alhamdulillah. All right, Sarah, I'll see you soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khair wa alaikum assalam.